Welcome to Grandad's Reviews. In this video we're going to have a look at some old Fujis and just see if they're worth getting in 2022 and if they're still relevant. First one we're going to have a look at Fuji X10. Small compact camera that Fuji brought out in 2011. It uses a 2/3 of an inch or 8.8 by 6.6mm sensor. Only you got contrast autofocus, but it shoots RAW. The lens is a 28 to 112mm equivalent, and it's got a novel way of switching itself on. It switches on when you open the lens. Now it has got an optical viewfinder just there, but the only criticism this camera got when it was released is there's no information in that viewfinder. It's just a glass viewfinder. It zooms with the zoom, but you don't know where the focus point is or anything like that. The only way to see the focus point is if you're looking at the back screen or you have a guess. That's got some film sims built in, and if we go here we have standard, Velvia, Provia, Sepia, then your black and whites. Now when it first was released, on the back it's got a RAW button, and that just switched from JPEG to RAW, but after a firmware that became your Q button, so you got your Q menu from that. Got some dials, got your exposure compensation and a PSAM dial, and you've got a rear dial there as well. No articulating screen, but yeah, an excellent little camera. I'll show you some of the images I've taken with this camera because I actually do enjoy carrying this around. It's quite vintage looking, rangefinder, vintage style. And it's just a great camera to have around. You have got a little pop-up flash if you want it. Watch you on the top. And we'll have a closer look at the controls, but I'll show you some of the images. Around about the same time, 2012, Fuji launched this, the XE1, and this has the X10 had like a Bayer sensor. This has got the X-Trans sensor, APS-C, so same as the main Fuji cameras now. And this obviously was the start of the XE line. We're on the XE4 now. No articulating screen, viewfinder. We've got shutter speed dial on the top. Got a rear control, Q button, exposure compensation. Again, a great little camera for carrying around. I use it with vintage lenses. I've got a little Industar 69 on here. Put it on focus peaking or on standard focus, and yeah, it's a great little camera for carrying around. And I say I just mainly use it for my vintage lenses because it just fits well with it. You can adapt most vintage lenses to this. We'll go over the controls, have a closer look, and I'll also show you some of the images I've taken with this because I think it's still an excellent camera as a starter camera or as a second camera for using your vintage lenses, because it's got contrast autofocus, so the autofocus isn't the best, but it still works quite well. So let's have a closer look at the controls and some of the images. So here we have the Fuji X10, as you can see, and on the top plate we have the pop-up flash, hot shoe, the PSAM dial with two custom slots. We've got movie, SP, advanced, auto and EXR. Got the shutter button, we have this function button, and we have the exposure compensation dial. On the front we've got self-timer light, we've got the focusing switch, so we've got manual focus, AFC, AFS, and then we've got this lovely Fujinon lens which is a f2 to 2.8, and it's 28 to 112, and it's also the on-off. So as soon as you hit 28, it switches the camera on. And obviously we've got the viewfinder there. Viewfinder with a diopter, switch for the flash. We've got the command dial, which in this case is doing the aperture because we're in aperture priority. Got the AFL lock switch. Got a D-pad which you can program. You've got drive mode, self timer, macro, and the flash when the flash is up. We've got a display button which we can change, and we can even switch the rear LCD off, and it's also the back button as well. And then, as I said earlier, this RAW button, which originally was to change the RAW, but now it is the Q button. Got play, seeing our images, the photometry or exposure, so we can change from spot, average or multi. AF, so we can move the AF spot around wherever we want, make it bigger, make it smaller. And white balance, we can change the white balance on there. And then in there, in the menu section, we haven't got a lot we can change, but that makes it an excellent camera to learn on. There's not too many menus to get stuck into. We're going to get into a few. And the back does back one. On the bottom, tripod socket, and then a slot for the battery and the memory card. And switch the camera off, we just do that. On the side, we've got a USB and an HDMI, which only displays the image onto a TV. It's not a live view or anything like that. And that's the X10. And then we've got the XE1. So this is the XE1. As you can see, on top plate, we've got pop-up flash, which you can actually angle so you can bounce it. Hot shoe. And then this dial is the shutter speed. And you got A and 4000 down to a fourth. Time and B. And it's in time you can control the shutter speed with the rear dial. Got the on off switch and the shutter release there. Function button which you can program, and then your exposure compensation. On the front, on this one, I've got my Industar on. We've got focus switch, manual, continuous or single. Got the self timer light, and we've got the button for removing the actual lens. On the side, we've got the remote or mic input, HDMI, and the USB. On the back, what do we get? Obviously viewfinder with a diopter, and then your sensor for switching the screen on and off. So we put the screen, put that on, and then obviously it swaps from one to the other. Button for the flash, viewing mode, so you can have it just in the viewfinder, just on the LCD, or with the eye sensor, which is that one. Rear command dial, got AE lock, AF lock, Q button, which brings that up. Got a D-pad, so we can change macro, film simulations. Those two not programmed. Display in black, so we've got same thing, info, standard or custom. Play button, drive button, so we can change it for different things including movie. Photometry again, and AF, so we can move that or make it bigger or smaller, and we can change the size. Pressing the button puts it back to standard. We've got focus check on it as well. And the bottom tripod socket, which unfortunately is very close to the battery flap where the card goes in as well. Menu, a few more than the X10. We've got 5 different sections, and then we've got the setup sections as well to go through. And this does sensor cleaning as well. So that's the XE1.